Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast. My name is Martin Harries, your host. I'm a filmmaker on occasion, but mainly can't stop yapping about movies. On this podcast, every episode, I pick a topic from a film that's coming out at the cinema or on streaming. I pick a favourite film from that topic and battle it out against a guest to decide which film would become the greatest film of all time. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Please enjoy part 2. Hello folks, welcome back to part 2 of our first episode of 2025, where we are having a look at vampire films in relation to the release of Nosferatu. And of course, you should know, if you're an avid listener, but if you're not, this is the part where we have a look at your Instagram responses from the previous episode. And that previous episode, the last one of last year, was on the Lord of the Rings films, and my brother went with The Fellowship of the Ring. Anton Kinelov, a regular responder, went with Return of the King. Andrew Corns from the Revisionist Almanac podcast went with Fellowship of the Ring. Mr. Wisier from the Movie Bonus podcast went with Two Towers. And my girlfriend went with the Return of the King, in brackets, minus the Shelob scene, bracket. Jen and Sarah, I am intrigued. What is your Lord of the Rings film of choice for you guys? Jen.
So I watched all three of these films. I didn't watch The Hobbit, I think like 2-3 years ago. So it's a little bit more fresh. And my choice is Return of the King.
Nice.
Just, everything, the epic battle scenes, I love it so much. So I think there's like the biggest set pieces in that one that were the most thrilling. So that was my choice.
Same. Gotta go with Return of the King.
Wow.
It is the finale of a really fantastic trilogy, and it just brings everything together so well. It's such a phenomenal movie.
Don't mind giant spiders then? Or good with that?
What's your choice, Martin? Did you share?
I picked Fellowship of the Ring. I just like this very adventure quality to the first film, and it's got a giant fire demon in it. So
yeah, which is awesome.
Floats my boat. That very cool.
Nice.
I just love a lot of the kind of little action scenes in it. I know it doesn't have huge battles, but yeah, I think Ian McKellen is great in it. In that one in particular. So we are talking vampire films, and it is my turn to go next, people. And my original choice was Near Dark, Catherine Bigelow's first movie, I believe. So I was really looking forward to that, and I was like, it's not on streaming, but it was on YouTube. So I was like, okay, let's stick with that. But I found out that it only had the commentary track on there. So I was like, that's really frustrating. So then my next choice was Kronos. Couldn't find that anywhere on streaming. Guillermo del Toro's one of his first movies, kind of a very different take on the vampire myth. So that was frustrating. So then I was like, you know what? I've never seen The Lost Boys. I know a lot of people kind of bang on about it, saying it's really great and it's kind of a staple of 80s movies. So I eventually went with The Lost Boys. I was very close to picking A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. That's a great little Iranian film. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but that's really good. It's kind of flips the concept of that title, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. So that is a really kind of great little film. But ultimately, I went with The Lost Boys. Initial reactions for me, I didn't love it, if I'm honest. It starts off really well. I kind of love this very punk 80s quality to it, but in the end I felt very frustrated with the script. Don't expect high scores with the script for me. I was very frustrated by the end. How about you guys? Initial reactions to The Lost Boys, Sarah?
Yeah, I also had never seen this. I struggled with this a bit. I think for me, this falls into one of those categories of I'm very aware that I'm watching this in 2024 and this came out in 87. And so it's trying to balance like how do I watch this film? Like, how much can I remove of my 2024 lenses to try and experience this film? And I really struggled to do that because there was a lot that I was like, this is not great what we're doing. I did appreciate like the 80s of it all and the punk of it all. I think that's really fun, especially in conversation with vampires. I think that's interesting. And I think the name and positioning vampires as Lost Boys is also really interesting. I just don't think that the movie does very much with what could be a really interesting premise.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just devolves into like vampire, just, I don't know, vampire fights. In the end, which
not good ones either.
No, I'm sure that it was a lot more fun to watch in the 80s when it came out. But like today watching it, I'm like, oh my God, this is hilarious. This is so funny, but it's not trying to be. So yeah, I struggled a little bit with this one. Yeah, it's just one of those that it was just hard for me to watch because I've seen so many other vampire movies do things like this better.
Jen, initial reactions for you?
Yeah, this didn't totally work for me either, but I think that there's like a 80s movie charm to it that, you know, just you kind of have a soft spot for. Like, so that's why it was hard for me to come up with scores because there's things about the way the characters are written that like, they're pretty one-dimensional, but that's also kind of the charm too, is like they're simple and some of the lines that they give are just like iconically charming and kind of silly. But I think the thing is I didn't view this film as like a very self-serious film. I felt like the film was kind of being silly, therefore it was easier and more funny for me to watch some of the bits of like it's doing this big dramatic, you know, thing, and you're like so I don't know perhaps like what the original intentions of the film were, but it's one of those films I feel like would come on TV and you're like, I remember that scene with the toilets exploding, you know, like there's just some of those bits that are kind of fun and silly. So I would say the charm of the film definitely got me and made this more enjoyable than I think it would have been if it didn't have that 80s charm that I think it's really fun.
I think what's kind of frustrating is that there's other like 80s vampire films that just do this genre better. One that springs to mind very clearly is Fright Night. I love Fright Night. I don't know if you guys have seen that. That's such a good teen vampire film from the 80s as well, and you have everything that you kind of want with that, and it's just really tight and done really well in a satisfying way from kind of all categories from this podcast. And just it just doesn't come together in this one, in The Lost Boys, certainly from a screenplay perspective. And I would say from an acting point of view as well, like some of the performances, I'm like, what are you doing? I don't understand. But yeah, we'll get to acting. But we always start with directing first. But before I do directing, I will do the plot. So what happens in The Lost Boys? Well, going to IMDb, as I always tend to do now, because I'm lazy. When a recently divorced mother and her 2 teenage boys move to a coastal town to stay with her father, it doesn't take long for the brothers to realize the area is a haven for something much more sinister than party-going surfers. I don't know about you, but I didn't see much surfing in the movie. But more bikes for me. But yeah, directing then, I quite liked the sequence where Sam is having a bath. It's kind of like half an hour into the film, I think. He's having a bath and listening to music, having fun. And Michael, his brother, he's drunk the blood that Keith Sutherland has given him that's starting the process of turning him into a vampire, and he's feeling the thirst for the first time, and he slowly walks up the stairs, all kind of backlit, hiding his face, and you're like, oh, okay, what's he gonna look like? Are there going to be some crazy makeup effects here? Then there's these kind of big long shots that come in from behind Michael when he's at like the bathroom door. Then they reveal his face, and nothing really changes physically, but you can tell like quite bluntly that he's lost himself to the thirst for blood. Then there's this kind of great fast cutting back and forth to the dog And Michael, before the dog attacks Michael, that was great. Really well done for me. But what was even more impressive is kind of these little moments of complete quiet from Sam. Like when he finds Michael down the stairs, I thought that was quite a good beat for me. Then when it's revealed that he only got his like hand bitten, that was kind of a bit disappointing. Then the reveal that kind of Michael is practically like see-through in the mirror didn't feel dramatic at all. It just kind of happens, and I think they were going for this certain all of a sudden reveal in the rhythm of it, but I don't think it worked for me, sadly, with that. But everything leading up to it, that was great in that particular scene. But it's very kind of hit and miss with this film in certain scenes. Like there's lots of bits that I liked, but there's also bits I'm like, that could have been done better. Unfortunately, with a lot of these 80s films of this kind of ilk, these fun, silly films, you can kind of see the filmmaking a little bit. And it's kind of hard to, as you say, Sarah, to take your like 2024 lenses off from that kind of filmmaking perspective. But yeah, it's very hit and miss, I think.
Yeah. This is one of those movies that's like almost like bad, so bad it's good. It's like a good bad movie, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things that I really loved about the kind of vision for this film from a directing perspective is just the synthy score that's used throughout. I think makes this film work better than if they took a really self-serious score and put it to the same movie. I think I would have felt much more differently about it. But that synthy, like kind of rock and that punk score helps add style and flair and tone to this movie that changes the way that I think I really received this movie, of it being really more of like a teen fun, silly drama versus a serious vampire movie, you know? And so I think I felt that most with David and his gang killing the partygoers out in the sticks. I thought like the score onto that, paired with the visuals of that scene, made it almost like cool and angsty, you know, that whole killing sequence versus terrifying and, oh my gosh, it's scary vampires. It's like, no, these are these cool vampires. They're like, you know, prowling around in the background, but they're kind of cool, you know? And I think that's that aspect and that twist of the storyline, it really worked for me.
Is that the scene like near the campfire?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I wasn't a huge fan of that. I think I was just like, I agree with the fact that I love the fact that they were going for this very like cool aspect to it, but I feel like I wanted more with kind of the, I guess the horror aspects that I was expecting in the movie. Like, I think it starts off pretty well, like the reveal, kind of the reveal scene in the tree as they're kind of stalking these kids around this campfire, I thought was pretty good, where kind of Kiefer Sutherland's face comes out of the darkness and you see his fangs and his eyes turn like a yellow red. That was good. Then you see like everyone else get their fangs out. That was cool, like you were saying, Jen. But then when like they attack the kids around the campfire, that felt very disappointing for me. Like they just cut around everything. There's a lot of like great movement with the camera to their, you know, point of view as they're like flying and scaring these kids, but you just get very like brief flashes of gore and then feeding, and you're just like, oh, okay. Oh, cool. This is getting good. Oh no, we're seeing something else now, and then something else. So the cutting is too quick for me in that. So it just felt very. It felt like they were very afraid to show too much violence to me, maybe for a rating reason. I'm not sure, but yeah, very much cutting around a lot of the violence. Which, I mean, I sound like a terrible person, but yeah, I want more violence for that. But
it is a vampire movie.
Yeah, you're expecting some horrible stuff, and I didn't have enough for me. Am I being too harsh, do you think, or is that fair?
No, I think what you're getting at is something that you touched on a little bit earlier, too, is this movie almost doesn't know what it wants to be and is trying to do too many things, because sometimes it's really silly. So I think the the reflection in the mirror, that reveal is a really great example, because it's supposed to be this really like intense, shocking moment of like, oh my gosh, this is insane. But the line that Sam says, it's such like little brother line of like, wait until I tell mom. Like, it's this really ridiculous, silly line. So silly. It's hilarious. It's so funny. But it also kind of takes you out of the scene a little bit. So it's this like trying to be like funny and lighthearted, but also trying to be like punk and dark and like really moody movie, but it doesn't really integrate those two things well. So I think it's just trying to maybe do too many things, and it doesn't know its identity as a vampire movie. And so then it's not as effective as it could have been.
Yeah, either like super campy and fun or dark and horrifying. Whereas I think, it's just a bit of a mix, more leaning more towards the campy and fun part, I think. But I think like the last action scenes at the end, I thought on the whole were fine. In the end, like it starts off with these kind of big, wide point of view shots of the vampires flying again. But at this point, I was like, we have to see them flying now. You know, this shot is being overused. Like you have that opening scene, and there's a few other scenes where you see them in point of view as they're flying. And sure, you definitely see one of them burst through the door, which was definitely borderline goofy when he crashes through the door. You know, the individual kind of vampire death scenes were pretty good. Like the one where he gets like arrowed through the stomach and gets electrocuted by the stereo. And then ends up exploding. That was pretty cool. But by far my favorite death was the first one, Paul, I think his name is, with the biggest hair, where like the really annoying kid, I can't remember his name now, fills the bath with holy water and garlic, and not only does the vampire melt in that classic 80s gooey way, but like all the pipes in the room burst and the vampire's like blood is going everywhere, and even the toilet explodes. That was great. What was not great though was kind of the final fight between David and Michael. Way too short. Didn't feel dangerous enough. I feel like they were just too focused on the fact that, okay, we need to do flying effects now. So they were kind of teasing that way too much, and like, we got to see them fly, and we don't have enough money to make this bigger or something. Yeah, it just felt kind of anticlimactic in that moment. What are your guys' thoughts on the last few scenes in that house?
Yeah, I like the electrocution and the toilets exploding. That was great, and I want more of that. Like I by the time we get to the like face off between Michael and David, I'm like, I don't care anymore. Like this is your fight. Color contacts are doing the most. Okay, they're like carrying the scene. Close up shots of eyeballs. Ooh, scary. Yeah. And I'm like, we don't need this. Like, give me some big, fun, silly set pieces. And I mean, I love the fact that like Grandpa shows up and, you know, is the hero of the day. But I think they could have made David's death be really like funny and bigger. You know what I mean? He's like the final boss in the video game. So you've shown us toilets exploding, and you've shown us electrocution. I want something even bigger, and I didn't get it. So it's a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah, it's a bit weird with the scale of the deaths, because like David is like Kiefer Sutherland is amazing in this film. I'll give it props for that. But like his death doesn't feel great, like compared to Paul, who barely says anything in the film. Yeah. And yet his blood makes a toilet explode. It doesn't make sense. You know, I want Kiefer Sutherland's blood to destroy all the toilets in the house. You know, that would be a lot better for me.
Yes, I agree. They started out too strong with that sequence.
Yeah, just the balance of it. The kind of the crescendo aspect, if you will, of the sequence of deaths just didn't feel right. What do you reckon, Sarah?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think another piece, I was thinking too much about this movie too while watching it, which is something that I do. And I get that we're taking our
Carry on.
We're taking our vampire lore from a comic book read by teenagers. So like, I understand that we don't have like decades or centuries of lore that we're basing this off of. But why did none of them like take one of their wooden sticks and like drive it through his heart? Like, he was not impaled by wood. So like, what are we doing? Why do we think that he's dead? So it was just little things like that where I was like, okay, this is number one, a letdown, because hello, exploding toilets. You're not going to beat that with impaled on like horns. But number two, it doesn't make sense for these characters who are supposedly like, oh my gosh, this is the big boss now, and we have to take him out to save everybody else. This is a big deal. Why wouldn't you like triple check to make sure that he's dead? Like, let's spray him with some holy water. Let's drive a stake through his heart. Like, everything you can do to make sure he's big dead. And they just look at him and go, okay, we're done. That was cool. What? This doesn't make sense.
There's plenty of toilet seat bits around to bash him with, you know.
Exactly. We got options, guys.
Yeah. But I think my favourite scene actually was kind of near the beginning. I quite liked the little motorbike sequence where Keith Sullivan and co like ride along the beach, and there's some like fantastic shots of them like with burning fires in the foreground, and you get this like great thermal waving effects for a few moments, which looked very cool and stylish. I like how you have a few shots of the characters on the bikes going hell for leather fast and at a like complete like right angle and getting as close as possible to the riders, and it looks like they're going ridiculously fast in moments. But there are obvious kind of close-up insert shots of the guys clearly in a studio, but also you have like clear like backlighting with a lot of smoke, which doesn't look natural at all, but I didn't really care because it looked really good and stylish in those moments. So I always appreciate that, because sometimes just with like night stuff these days you can hardly see anything what's going on. So and as long as it looks good, and you know, why not stick a huge massive light in there? Yeah, go for it. So I quite like that. Plus I liked this sort of big pull out shot to show they're kind of riding towards this cliff.
Yeah.
You know, I thought that worked well, but when like Michael crashes, again, I did feel like they were kind of heavily cutting around that. But apart from that, it was a pretty great scene for me, that initial chase, and it was kind of great too, as you kind of go into their secret lair, seeing all this great stuff around. Yeah.
I love the vampire lair. I thought that was really fun world building and some really great set design as well. Just, it looks like a literal junkyard. Like, it's just clutter everywhere, but all the like nooks and crannies of like where they hang to sleep, I thought was really cool. And it sets up later on when the Frog Brothers come and have to kind of like find the vampires too. It was really a whole fun bit. There's a lot happening in this movie, actually, now that I think about it. There's the whole sequence with like the Frog Brothers being like vampire hunters and like them having their own little mission too throughout was such a charming little addition. But like, you know, it kind of goes a little somewhere, but not fully. So there's that whole sequence too.
Yeah, there's a little kind of Goonies vibe going on. With it, obviously. Corey Feldman is in it. Obviously, he's a Goonie. But yeah, an interesting kind of vibe there. Favorite scene or shot for you, Sarah?
Yeah, I liked. Okay, so the two scenes that kind of stood out for me for very different reasons is I liked the build up to them hanging off of the, I guess like a bridge with the train passing over them. I thought that did a really good job of like building the tension, and the way that the camera was constantly cutting, I think helped create that sense of fear and like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And is Michael going to make it, or is he going to fall? What's going to happen? So I thought that was effective in building tension. And then another one that I really enjoyed is the preparation of the house for the final showdown. It kind of reminded me of in Home Alone when he's setting all of the traps throughout the house, and it had that vibe to it, which I really enjoyed watching them trying to MacGyver this house so that no vampires could get in. I loved that.
Yeah. Just them like crushing garlic was funny.
Which, how did you get a giant bag of garlic like that? Where are you getting your supplies from?
Yeah, must be a great market in Santa Clara. Favorite scene for you, Jen?
I think it's the sequence with the first two kills at the end in that final
definitely.
sequence. I think that's the one that I'll remember most about this film. That the shot of one of the dudes getting electrocuted and exploding, and then the toilets and pipes exploding shot. Those two will seared in my brain. And I think just like some pretty great visuals there. They're so silly and over the top. It's so good.
Yeah, you mentioned the bridge scene, Sarah, with all the mist. Yeah. You guys are from the West Coast. Do you get that amount of mist in like a big ravine? That seems a lot of mist to me. To hide effects.
I will say that one time, so I'm originally from Arizona, and one time we went to the Grand Canyon and the entire thing was filled with fog and I could not see the bottom of it. And it was the wildest thing that I've ever seen. So it's probably not frequent, but I've seen something similar in Arizona. So just putting that out there.
Awesome. So directing score, guys, what are you going for The Lost Boys? Don't be afraid to be brutal. It's fine.
I'm going to just share mine. I'll go. I'm giving it a 6. Yeah, I think it's solid enough. And I don't think there's anything like particularly like visionary or memorable or whatnot that I'll like take with me from this film. So, it does what it needs to do from a directing perspective. Fine enough. And I think there's some like mismatched tonal things that we've been discussing around like a clarity of a singular vision that could have been much stronger.
Yeah.
My score is a 6. What about y'all?
Yeah, mine is also a 6.
Okay.
So look at that. That made that easy.
Yeah,
I think that there's some really good things. Like Jen, you mentioned the music. I loved the music in this. I thought it was so effective for me. And then some of the like design, like set design pieces and all of that I thought were really strong. But then there are other pieces of this that aren't as great. So yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag for me. So a 6.
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar ballpark as you guys say. I'm going to go around the 6 area. I just got very frustrated with how like they just Joel Schumacher, who directed it, like he was just cutting around a lot of stuff, which is very frustrating. But you have some great like charming 80s vibes here with some of the gore, which is great to see. And as you said, Sarah, like the costuming, I thought, and the hair was fantastic. Really great. I certainly wouldn't wear any of that stuff myself, and I certainly wouldn't be able to pull it off, even in the 80s probably, but I appreciate it. It looked very cool. So yeah, I'll go like an 8. What am I talking about? A 6.3. Yeah. Screenplay then, people. So the vampire lore here is really interesting and very frustrating too. And unfortunately it feels like the vampire laws just come into play when the screenplay requires them to. Certainly the positives I thought were kind of all the rules that related to vampire bats, like the flying shots in the opening I felt was quite clever in the beginning, because you think you're just kind of watching big, wide establishing shots. No, it soon makes it clear that a vampire is stalking the cop in that opening scene. Vampires flying also kind of feels like a very old school vampire power that you don't really see that often in a lot of modern vampire films. So that was kind of nice to see that they're bringing that back. Well, kind of 80s, yeah. So I definitely appreciated seeing that. And I kind of loved how it was kind of directed in the most part. Like, I do think, though, the POV shots are very overused, but I like kind of the little scene where Michael discovers he's a vampire, where he kind of just randomly floats up to the ceiling. I thought that was well done with that particular vampire lore. Did you enjoy a lot of the kind of the vampire-esque, the bat vampire-esque vampire lore in this? Did it work for you guys? No? You could say no.
I think the thing that I was really thinking about while watching this movie is watching this now in 2024, like Sarah mentioned, and having seen movies, TV shows, stories play with all of the vampire lore so much, and like literally every dimension possible, is a perspective that definitely shapes how we view this. And I wondered at the time if this felt really fresh and cool and exciting. You know what I mean? So I think that's the hard part, is like having to calibrate to, like, if I'm like in 87 watching this and feeling the like cool vampire on screen that I feel like I've never seen much before of, then this might have been, I would have might have eaten this up, you know? So I think that's the more challenging part. I think the parts that like worked the best for me with the vampire stuff is seeing the collision of the 80s nostalgia kind of like worldview collide with the concept of vampire. So a lot of it's from Sam, of just like seeing Sam's reaction to like, oh my God, vampires, with this like really charming kind of like perspective that I think are predominant in 80s films, and tonally I think it's like the most fun part for me, that I think we don't get as much now. So that was where I kind of leaned into it and like really appreciated the vampire bits, is just seeing Sam and kind of the Frog Brothers navigate this concept of vampires in a very endearing way. So the other bits I feel like we've seen movies play with a lot more and do a better job of it. So
I think one part of like vampire lore that they bring back and I appreciated a lot is when like Keith Sutherland kind of tricks Michael with the Chinese food. I thought that was really good, because we've covered Bram Stoker's Dracula in the past and kind of that Dracula, and I think Nosferatu as well. They use like visual trickery with their victims, which I thought was a great concept to kind of bring back for this movie. Michael is eating the rice of the Chinese, and then Keith Sutherland, David, is like, oh, you're actually eating worms. You know, and he chucks it on the floor. He thinks it's worms, but no, when the trick is over, I guess, it's not a lot of it. They only really reveal that in the cutting, and it is just rice. So yeah, that was kind of well done, and I appreciated that. But I think with the negatives, with the vampire lore, they kind of seem to introduce some of the rules very late in the day, and you learn from Star, kind of the love interest that's hardly in the movie, frankly, that Michael is just like half a vampire, and that's why he doesn't burn in the sunlight. I just assumed they were kind of fine in sunlight, that Michael was okay, but then it's just explained, oh, he's just half of one. I'm like, oh, okay, that's too late to tell me that. And Sam kind of reads a comic book that if you kill like the head vampire, you just automatically turn back to a human again. One, it just feels very tonally off for me, where you're just not sure whether they're being serious, that it's another rule, or whether it's a joke as he reads it from a comic. So you're left like hanging a bit there. And then two, it just feels very convenient that they just turn back to a human. So it goes against for me, it goes against like a lot of like vampire themes from other films that they portray so well, like immortality and addiction. Well, if you kill the head vampire of this particular vampire gang, you'll be fine if you're a half vampire, if you don't do your first kill. So it just feels like the film is feeding you rule after rule well after the halfway point in the film, and it just felt very frustrating. I'm like, okay, I don't need any more rules now. You're just feeding me rules to fit your plot. So that, and not enough character stuff that's driving the film. You're just feeding me more rules, and I just bumped up against that a lot. Did you have that same problem?
Yeah, I felt similarly. I think for me, the rules came too late, and then they felt a little too convenient. So I really wish that it was, if this film was structured differently, and the killing the head vampire to like turn everybody else human, I think that there's an interesting idea in there, but it's not like played out very well. So I really wish that was revealed earlier in the film, and then it could almost become more of a process movie of like, who is the head vampire? Let's investigate. Let's figure it out. Let's try all these tests. And the film does a little bit of that, but it doesn't do it well, I feel like. So I feel like there's some good ideas in here, and there's some creative ideas, but they're just not executed as well as they could have been. But I was tickled by the idea of them getting all of their vampire rules from a comic book. And I just thought that was so fun and creative. And I appreciated that. It made me have a lot of questions, though, about like, where is this comic book coming from? Is there like a whole like vampire hunter comic book publishing company that's just like releasing these? But yeah, I thought that was a creative twist on the like, this is my thick vampire rule book that I got centuries ago. You know, I thought that was a fun twist on the vampire hunter trope.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I don't think they play on that enough, really. Mm-hmm. One film that kind of comes to mind is Logan, where X-23 Laura like is really invested in this X-Men comic book, and like, we have to go here in this comic. Yeah. Obviously, tonally is very different, but I feel like they could have done something like that, where this kid really believes in this comic book to get to your end goal. And I feel like it does feel a little bit half-baked in this, and it's just too messy with everything else that's going on. And I feel like you would have definitely have captured more of a like kid adventure style tone of the film if you were getting a lot of your vampire lore from the comic books that they were reading, and just give it to us a lot earlier as they're going through their journey in the film, not, in the last half hour or whatever. You're just like, you're telling me this now? Okay. But certainly the most frustrating thing for me, and I was very annoyed, was the reveal that Max, the guy that Michael's mum was dating, is the head vampire. Like, you have this scene earlier in the film where, unwisely at the time, like Sam and Edgar and Alan suspect that Max could be a vampire. But my first reaction was, he is a vampire, because he asks Michael at the door, like, aren't you going to invite me in? And it's done in a very like blasé way and feels very like quick, but I clocked it. But then the kids at the dinner do all these things that would definitely show up a vampire. So I was like, oh, okay, Max cannot possibly be a vampire. The kids are just making like fools of themselves in front of the adults. A sort of a common scene that kind of happens in kid-focused adventure films. But at the end, when the reveal happens and Max says, when you invite a vampire in your home, you're powerless. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not having that. That just feels super convenient and completely bending vampire rules to fit your own plot, because they feel like they need something extra to happen after a very disappointing fight between David and Michael. So I was very annoyed at the end of that with that reveal. I was just like, come on, people. You can't introduce something like that, like in the last scene. That's crazy.
Yeah, they had to have explained that a little bit more, I think.
Yes.
And have that happen like in the middle of a different version of this. It does feel like there's two movies in this one movie,
Right.
Like, have the whole kid adventure movie, cut Michael out of it, that whole bit, just they are hunting with their little gang together for the head vampire, or do the like teen angsty, like just moved to a new school, like male bonding bit, making friends, but getting caught up with the wrong friend group that happens to be vampires and wanting to impress them, but then feeling torn with, and then you've got the love interest too. That's kind of like, it's stuck in the middle. Like, that's a whole movie right there too, which could have been some interesting commentary around like, male bonding dynamics, all that kind of stuff. That's a different movie too, with a really like angsty score. Would have loved that.
Yeah, because this film is pretty short. It's like just over 90 minutes. So you could easily pack a lot more. It doesn't necessarily have... You could definitely have both type of films, I think, in this. But just a lot of it, like both stories need to be fleshed out a lot more. And I think it would improve it a lot, I would say. It would just be a lot more satisfying and it'd work a lot better rather than trying to shoehorn in an end. By just writing yourself out of a hole with the vampire laws. Interesting and funny lines. I have a few. I love the grandpa in this film. If all the corpses buried around here were to stand up all at once, we'd have one hell of a population problem. That was fun. one just very strange one. I think very 80s, and I'm not sure you would say it in a modern movie. From Sam to Michael, when Sam is like trying to chase Star, and he says, come on, admit it, you're chasing her. I'm at the mercy of your sex glands, bud. Very weird. Have you guys got any?
Yeah, the grandpa was my favorite. I think he is the MVP of this film, and he had some of the best lines. I loved his whole bit around the TV guide, and he says, I just like to read the TV guide.
Yeah.
You don't need a TV. I loved that so much. And then probably my favorite line from Grandpa is, Lucy, you're the only woman I ever knew that didn't improve her situation by getting divorced.
So good.
Oh dear.
I thought about it too. I'll add a couple here. One is Edgar Frog. This is just a cover. We're dedicated to a higher purpose. We're fighters for truth, justice in the American way. Perfectly captures that like kid dynamic.
That's the thing with that character. I'm just like, are you being serious or are you joking? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
From Sam again to his brother. My own brother, a goddamn shit-sucking vampire. Oh, wait. Wait till our mum finds out, buddy. That was good.
I feel like that line summarizes the vibe of this movie to a T.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's so funny.
Let's start with the little one. First come, first staked.
Yes. Yep.
Cheese personified, I think.
The bit when David very seriously says, you don't have to beat me, Michael. You just have to try and keep up.
Yeah.
80s movie summarized to a T.
Yeah, that was great.
Like,
one that made me laugh out loud was when they're kind of trying to get away in the car and when they nearly drive off the cliff. And I think Corey Feldman says, or it might be Sam actually, burn rubber does not mean warp speed. Yeah, that was hilarious. One thing about Santa Clara I never could stomach, all the damn vampires. It was just such a ironic line by the grandpa at the end. So if you literally just spoke to your grandpa and spent more time with him at home when you were supposed to, you wouldn't have a problem. You would just stay at home. But I think my favorite is just probably Death by Stereo.
Yeah.
Which was awesome. So screenplay score for me, this is not great. It's not. Oh, it's very frustrating. I mean, I guess I got to give it props for, there are some cool lines here, and it does start well. It just doesn't end well at all, in my opinion. So I might be pretty harsh, like a 5.8. Yeah.
Okay.
Not good. How about you guys?
Sarah, do you want to share yours?
Yeah, this is kind of, it's mixed because there's all the story structure things that we have talked about. And I do appreciate the creativity, even though I don't think some of it works well. And then some of the lines are hilarious. So there are some positives, there are some negatives. So I'm just going to go straight down the middle and give it a 5.
Wow.
Okay.
I'm giving it a 6.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
5.5?
Yep.
Acting. Oh dear.
Oh my. This is... Yeah.
So Corey Feldman, he's really bad in this. I think the poor guy. I don't know why he put this deep voice on his character to kind of just at first I thought it was just to intimidate Sam, like the younger brother who's new to the town of Santa Clara, but no, that's just his weird voice throughout the whole movie. And I think there were times when you actually do hear his normal voice when he's shouting, almost as if he just forgets or he just can't do the weird deep voice when he is shouting. I don't know, but it just didn't work at all for me. And because we all know what he actually sounds like from other big films from the 80s era, like The Goonies and Stand By Me and stuff. You're like, can we just hear his normal voice, please? This is very off-putting. Did you have the same feeling, or were you okay with it?
Yeah, choices were made in this film that were not great. So I chalked it up to him just being just a silly kid and honestly tried not to pay too much attention because it's not great. We've seen a lot better from him than we saw in this film.
Absolutely. Because his performance was kind of at a point where I was just like, is he actually creating a character within this film? or is it him, if you know what I mean? Is this kind of a separate persona that he's putting on for his own character, if that makes sense? But I don't think it is at all. To impress Sam and his brother, but I really don't think it is, sadly.
I'm trying to think about what the best performance is in this film, because I think most of them are pretty, like, candidly, like, pretty below average. Like, there's not much to sink your teeth into, I think especially the female performances and the way those roles are written are pretty rough to watch too, just especially the mom with Lucy. And I'm like, oh man, we've seen this too many times, and I'm glad we've evolved since this.
Yes. And Star is supposed to be like the driving force for Michael of what he does, his motivation, but she's barely in this movie.
And she is just really boring.
Yeah.
There's not much there. Not much personality or flair to be like, oh, I get why he's enthralled by her. Like, I would be too. I'm like, I'm not.
Yeah. No. Just big hair, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But I think I got to give props to Keith Sutherland. I thought he was pretty good in this. Like, I thought he was good when he's like tempting Michael to drink the blood from that bottle near the beginning. He just has this kind of amazing like menace about him, but still keeps that cool factor about him too at the same time. For me, like, the actual Lost Boys are severely underused, I think. Especially with Keith Sutherland. Like, there's always an argument to say that you don't want to like overuse such a brilliant, powerful performance, like, say, Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, but he's kind of surrounded by amazing performances in that cast in The Dark Knight. Whereas in The Lost Boys, you're just craving for him to come back on screen, because for me, he was clearly the best performance and my favourite performance by far. What's your opinion about Keith Sutherland, guys?
Yeah, I think he's really effective as like the cool guy ringleader. And you can see why people want to hang out with him, but he gives that like menacing piece of it too. So I feel like he does what he needs to do to kind of bring this character to life and give this character a bit more than a lot of the others have. It feels like he was all the characters are very thinly written, and I feel like Kiefer Sutherland does his best to bring something to David, at least.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Corey Haim, who plays Sam, I thought was fine. A little annoying, I think, in the beginning. I'm not a huge fan of like child performances in films, but yeah, it wasn't too bad towards the end, I would say. It was fine.
Yeah, he does what he needs to do for the like little brother role, I think, and that like earnestness that I think is like distinguished in this like era of movies as well, of just like the family that's like, when he delivers the like, you wait till mom finds out, buddy piece, you're like, but it's believable. You're probably that little brother dynamic. It's very prominent.
Favorite performance for you, Sarah?
I think I want to give a shout out to Edward Herrmann as Max.
Okay.
I think for me, he's just really fun in the role, and he balances the nice guy and creep really well, right off the bat. And so I appreciated that he had those two sides to him, and you could see them both in his performance.
Yeah, because through his performance, you definitely don't suspect he's a vampire whatsoever. Because when the Lost Boys come into his video store, you don't really realize the first time you watch it, like, that they have a relationship. They know each other. You just think, oh, they've caused trouble in the past in his store, and he just wants them to leave. I never really clocked, I guess, that because they just leave so quickly, because he's the head vampire, that's why they leave so quickly. But yeah, because he is kind of like this bumbling sort of, not charming, just a normal guy.
Yeah.
Just like the complete opposite to a punky guy like the Lost Boys are. So you never suspect him. And then, as I said, like when he is, it's just like, come on.
Yeah.
Just
it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Jen, favorite performance for you?
There's slim pickings, honestly.
Yeah.
I probably will have to give it to Corey Haim for Sam. I think he does what he needs to do for this, like the vibe of this movie being that, like, the earnestness of like, oh my God, my brother's a vampire. Like, what would that look like in an 80s movie? I think he like nails it. So
okay, so acting score. This is tough because I really liked Kiefer Sutherland, but I really didn't like Corey Feldman and a lot of the other actors. I mean, the other Lost Boys are like fine. They're just giving this kind of punky 80s vibe, which is what they're there to do. I mean, I would have loved to have seen a lot more from them. It was like Paul has just like a few lines before he has the best death. So it's difficult. I will go just kind of a straight 6, I think, because mainly for Kiefer Sutherland, I think. I was more frustrated with the screenplay than the acting, I think, in the end. Acting score for you guys? What are you going for?
I'm going to be pretty harsh. I'm giving it a 4. I think it's below average.
Ouch.
Yeah. there's not much to work with. And so.
Sarah?
Sorry,
bumping it up or going bringing it down?
Yeah,
from a 4.
I also struggled with this, but I'm just gonna go straight down the middle again, and I'm gonna give it a 5. Okay. I think that there are some highlights and there's some lowlights, but like you, Martin, my biggest issue is with the screenplay, and I think that some of the actors, they did the best with what they got, which was almost nothing. So I'll give it a 5.
Yeah. So 4.5?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah.
So why is this a classic again? Right.
I was wondering, I was thinking about that the whole time.
Yeah.
I was really curious too. And the only thing I can think about is like, if you view this from like this is all silly and fun and ridiculous, then like it kind of works because everything's like kind of over the top. So it's like a good, bad movie, Yeah. That maybe has that nostalgia factor because I was trying to figure it out as well.
Yeah. Just go watch Fright Night, people. Right. Let's add up the scores then for The Lost Boys. Hold your breath. The Lost Boys gets a pretty bad score of 34.1. So
excellent.
That's probably one of the biggest gaps for a win for What We Do in the Shadows I think we've ever had on the show.
Wow.
That's a pretty big gap.
Yep.
So yeah, What We Do in the Shadows wins this one that got 51.2, whereas The Lost Boys got 34.1. Next episode, as a movie called Heart Eyes is out. So from the makers of the recent Scream movies, is coming out in February. So we'll be talking Slasher Films 2. And our guest for that one will be Parker from Dissect That Film podcast. So that should be very exciting. Do check that one out. Guys, you have been incredible. It's been great chatting about these vampire films with you. One really great one, really, frankly, bad one as well, but it's both been fun. This is your opportunity again to tell us about your podcast and where can we find you guys?
Yeah, so we are the Movies and Us podcast, as we mentioned at the top. We essentially are the premise of our show is we pick a film each week and review it. It'll be either new releases or some of the classics and most beloved ones from the past. And we kind of talk about the larger themes. It's the putting it in conversation with things and trends in culture, society, all that good stuff. And you can find us on various podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that goodness. And then we're on the socials on Threads, TikTok, Instagram. Yeah, so come check us out. It's been really great being on the pod, talking about vampire films, putting these two movies in conversation with each other. I think it was really notable having them both be in this kind of like more lighthearted horror comedy genre. So a little bit better comparison point versus something that's really dark and moody and something that's what we do in the shadows vibes. So
yeah. Excellent. Right, guys, it's time to say goodbye. I know, very sad, but it is goodbye from Sarah. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. We had so much fun. And looking forward to Nosferatu 2024, which is a very different mood, very different movie, but should still be lots of fun to watch. So thanks for having us on. This was great.
Awesome. And it's goodbye from Jen. Bye-bye.
Yes, thanks so much for having us on. Really great. I think I'm going to need to watch What We Do in the Shadows after Nosferatu cleanse afterwards.
Yeah, there you go.
Come back to baseline, you know.
And it's goodbye from me. The next time I'm in Wellington, I'm just going to watch out for some very fabulously dressed with funky hair men and just avoid them, really. Or just have a nice chat. Bye-bye. That's it for part 2. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out part 1 if you haven't done so already. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell me what your favourite films are relating to the episodes. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for X at FVF_podcast. Plus, we are now on YouTube, so hit that like button and comment there. If you do, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.